Hatep and Ma'at, bringing you truth. I'm Aust NeferKa. Welcome. If it's your first time here, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's great to meet you. This is the perfect video to be introduced to things in because this is going to be my first time, I think, publicly just really unpacking my story a bit. So I'm going to try to consolidate it into a cowrie shell and just explore, the past 9 years of my healing journey and what this spiritual awakening is. And really, it's been on my spirit for a while, but I really got moved as of the 11th. For those of you who know, 11/11 or November 11th is a very powerful portal opening due to the synchronicity. A lot of people, when they come into their spiritual awakening, 11/11 is one of the most common angel numbers, as they're called, or I like to call them ancestor numbers. But just in terms of the synchronicity and the language of the divine, of the universe, being numbers and mathematics, when you have those number synchronicities, the symbolism of them and the messages and what they intuitively communicate to us is very significant. So that's one that becomes very commonly known very quickly. And I think even in popular culture, the angel numbers have become a thing. And yeah, so I just had this really deep clarity of like really, the cycle being complete and the initiation of really coming forward to be more direct about telling my story. So before I just dive right in, if you're here, again, welcome back. I'm just really thankful for anyone being interested in my story. So I just want to give thanks for your presence here. I'm also going to use my Angel 1111 spray, which is a spiritual spray that I actually just brewed on 11/11. And this is just to reflect any dense or negative energies, also calling in the honorable, beloved ancestors and the divine spirits that are indwelling within us, just as we connect and commune during this exchange to reflect back any energy that's directed towards me, to reflect to you as a mirror the power that you have within yourself to heal yourself. So I'm also going to acknowledge the spirit of cacao because I am definitely having this heart-opening brew of cacao with coconut milk and some raw honey, and it's very delicious. So I just want to welcome you in first and foremost with some breath. If you can just come into consciousness of your breath with me, wherever that may be, without judgment of the breath itself. Just acknowledge, where your breath is at. If your breaths are naturally going in deeper, or if they happen to be very shallow, just take some time to just consciously come into it and just acknowledge and give gratitude and thanks, because that is what connects us all, but that is why we are here. It's sustaining, it's life force. So giving thanks. Gratitude is really the medicine of the moment, I have to say. I'm going to also just have some 888 hertz frequency vibrations kind of going in the background. It might be very subtle, so it might be just a subconscious thing. But yeah, thank you for being here. A lot of people may know me as Priscilla. Priscilla is my birth name, and throughout my process and my journey, I was actually given my spiritual name by my spiritual father, Baba Heru, which will come in at a certain point in my journey. But the name that I was born with is Priscilla, and I love my name so much, and it means ancient. And it really is going to be illustrated in my story, because ultimately our story is really our key to liberation, because our story is what it's all about. You know, a lot of times we get caught up in the hype of externalizing our process and our life experience to looking at what other people are doing, or to feeling like we need to buy things or do certain things in order to, you know, connect with spirit, when it's all within us and it is our life, right? You know, I wish I had one of my unks close by. But just the essence of life itself and the way that we navigate eternity in our lifetime, that is the opportunity for spiritual growth. So my story, I have to say, like, if I want to begin at the beginning, it began as soon as I came through that portal of my mother's womb, or when at the inception of, you know, my father's sperm fertilizing my mother's egg. Yet that wouldn't even be the beginning, because Priscilla also means like primordial. And there is something very ancient about my essence and my energy that people always felt and commented on. But the more that I cleansed myself and began to attune and tune my vessel to its original nature and frequency, that aspect of me became very clear. But it is a lot, there's a lot captured in the vibration of our name. So whatever your name actually means, the name you were given at birth, that's a great place to start in terms of consciously looking at all the codes that are already interwoven in our journey at its inception. Because, like I said, we're continuing, we're in a space-time continuum. Everything is about the cycles of time. And yeah, so before I even began in this life, my spirit has been here many, many, many times. And that's something that I became more and more conscious of as I've come into my healing process. But even as a child, you know, there are certain things that were more, they're just more palpable to us because of the innocence and the clarity. But as we begin to get stained in our, you know, in our lives, and we begin to take on more and more programming, we can drift away from that ability, that intuitive nature, that spiritual essence that as a child we're very close to. So what I will start with is 9 years ago, because where I'm actually starting my story from is when I cut off all of my hair, because I think that that was a very significant pivotal point in my journey, consciously. And I know we get a lot of like connotations we have around certain words like conscious, like people think of like the conscious community or being conscious of Black history, or certain aspects of consciousness that have been like kind of put into the public sphere as a narrative. And I just want to say, like, when I'm talking about consciousness, I'm just literally talking about, by definition, like your awareness, your presence with something, to be like consciously, you know, present with it and aware of it. So I began to be aware that I was taking my life consciously into my own hands, instead of just kind of being on autopilot and kind of doing the things that I feel like I was programmed to do at that point. Because, and I'm not going to talk too much about that, because I actually have a video 9 years ago from when I cut off all my hair. So you can actually, and that's what I actually love about my YouTube channel. Because originally it was just like a personal YouTube, and then as things progressed into being more based on high tops and heels, and being able to host like panel events and different things like that, which most of them have been archived at this point. But I will be curating a lot of those things, you know, in a new form soon. So don't worry about that. If there's anything in the archive that you wanted to see or saw before and that you would like to, you know, have access to, those things are going to be curated. But what is still on there is my big chop, when I started my locks, And those things are very significant because I think the hair journey is something that's very, very significant to our healing process. And I'm actually gonna go ahead and let my hair out because just right now, because it's kind of like a hair update as well, because it's been some time. Look at how she's grown. Look at how she's grown. So the hair is such a big part. And when I first cut off all my hair, I didn't have the intention of going natural. And I know a lot of people go into their natural state of their hair without going through a conscious, like intentional spiritual process with that. But by virtue of just doing it, like that is a spiritual process. And I think that the most significant part about it is the fact that our hair is our crown. You know, our head is our crown. And when we think about the aritu, which is in Meru Neter, or what people commonly known as the hieroglyphs, but Meru Neter means or translates into divine speech. And in the Meru Neter, the vibration or the word that is used for the chakras or the energy centers is aritu. If you're talking about one energy center, it's arit. If you're saying in general, it's arit. So in plural, it's aritu, and singular, it's arit. So we have way more than 7 aritu because we have many energy centers, and our energetic body extends beyond our physical body. But for the sake of the common aritu or chakras that we know about, the crown is our connection to our divinity because we start coming out of our physical form and into our ethereal body. And this is our connection point to the divine, to all of the forces of nature that are interwoven into this experience that we're having. And I want to demystify a couple things because I know people are different in different stages of their journey, but sometimes it's really helpful to bring that scientific element in because a lot of people have been programmed to think that the spiritual is like not scientific when it is. So I just want us to be clear that when we're talking about sorry, I just want to make sure I don't have my audio on because I don't want it to make any noise. But when we're talking about our energy centers or energy bodies, like nobody questions whether Wi-Fi is real because you can't see it. Okay, so think about that and know that there's way more beyond the radio waves and all the different frequencies and things that are going on, especially with certain technologies that are common now, like coming into 5G and different things. There's so much going on in the atmosphere and in our environment that we cannot see that is very scientifically clear, you know, in terms of the electromagnetic field, all kinds of different things. So this is not some like, oh, spook type of thing, especially at this point. Like the frequency and the vibration on the planet has elevated to such a degree that most of us are becoming aware that there's way more than meets the eye, right? But I just want to say that. So that being said, like when you are putting these toxic chemicals, right, as I had done for my entire life, pretty much since I was 7 years old up until I think I was like 23. So yeah, it can stifle your connection. Like that's your antenna. And it's definitely disturbing things. So I felt the moment that I cut off my hair, because I never even had the desire to go back to perming my hair. I didn't even think about it. And when I cut it, I had no thoughts of like, oh, what's it gonna be? What's it gonna, you know, I just cut it to cut it. But then as soon as I cut it and it like, I don't know, I kind of wish I just enjoyed it being bald a little bit longer, but I know I'm gonna cut my hair, all my hair off again at some point. So I'll enjoy it at that point. But my point is just, the hair has been a huge part of my journey. And I'm honestly only realizing that really deeply right now as I'm even talking about my journey because there's so many different aspects of it. But I would say that that was a beginning point. at that point, I also want to say that my relationship, I had a long-term 9-year relationship with my partner who was very pivotal to my spiritual awakening. And that relationship in itself was such a catalyst for my awakening, because what he reflected in me. And that was so important for me, because I hadn't had like a healthy relationship. And I don't want to say, like, make it seem like that relationship, was without turbulence, because at the point when we had come together, like, I had a lot of trauma and pain and behavioral patterns that were really disgusting and detrimental, that I began to heal through and work through at the core throughout that relationship. So I'm so eternally grateful for the reflection of Rageb. And I felt like the most important thing that was reflected through that relationship was the encouragement of self-expression and the perspective of me as an artist, which up until that point, I wasn't really consciously aware of. As creative as I was and as inspired as I was in that nature, I never looked at myself as an artist, because I was running so much programming that I was really looking at myself through a distorted lens. And I thought, an artist is someone who does this or that. And, I just didn't see that, because I wasn't like professionally creating art. But my nature is so creative. So it was so important to have someone constantly encouraging me to express myself, because I was coming from a very emotionally unstable place. So another big part of my journey is also, I wanted to share that I'm a Gemini. My son, I'm not going to tell a lot of aspects of my natal chart, because I feel like that's very intimate information. But I will say that my sun sign is Gemini, and I also have another very significant Gemini placement in my chart, my natal chart. And that twin nature is very dualistic, and it is balanced, because I want to speak of it in an African context, because Gemini is the energy of Tehuti, and Tehuti is complemented by Ma'at, the scales of truth, justice, the Libra energy. And even though on the zodiac wheel, the Libra and Gemini are not complementary accesses energetically, and like I said, I'm going to the ancient cosmic consciousness of our ancestors, those energies were considered to be complementary cosmic forces of nature, right? So they're beyond this physical material world. They're cosmic principles. Tehuti being wisdom, expression, communication, connectivity, intellect, and Ma'at being truth, justice, balance, reciprocity, symmetry, wholeness. Right? So these were considered to be complement, and our ancestors always had all energies in pairs, in couples, right? There was always a counterpart or a complement to each energy. You had the masculine aspect of the energy and the feminine aspect of the energy, which is merely just to say an active element and a receptive element. Just like we have a plug and an outlet. Everything in nature, in the universe, in this cosmic experience that we're having has its complementary energy, and that's how things stay stabilized. And really, I say that to say, like, I really needed to have my partner at that time, who was a Libra, to really show me equanimity. And because he had gone through enough in his journey where he had stabilized his energy and really embodied a degree of beyond equanimity, like just that like composure and just that balanced, state of being, and being able to control one's emotions, right? So that reflection was very important for me. what also happened at that same time, because when I decided to cut my hair, it was 1 year after meeting him. And I had already moved to New York. So like I'm saying, like I was born in Boston, born and raised in Boston, but my mother and my father, my foremothers and forefathers, all my closest ancestral line is through West Africa, particularly Cabo Verde. And both my mother and my father were born on the island of Fogo, which is part of the volcanic archipelago nation of Cabo Verde, or I should say occupied territory of Cabo Verde, and known as Cabo Verde. Most people know that as Cape Verde. So Cabo Verde is a very unique cultural expression and signature of my life, because I grew up in Boston in the Cape Verdean community. And I learned how to speak Crioulo, which is our language, which is a mixture of the African dialect with the Portuguese language, because the islands were colonized by Portugal. So that cultural, like I learned how to speak Crioulo before I learned to speak English. You know, first generation, all of that affected me in terms of like cultivating my personality. But when I decided to move, because like something about Boston has never really clicked for me, just in terms of like, I've always been kind of like different. I don't know how else to really say it. Like just, you know, dress kind of out there. I always like something that's a little like, you know, I don't know, just different, something that stands out. And in Boston, you could stand out like a sore thumb any day with something subtle. So moving to New York was like really a big thing for me, because it just allowed me to like really expand my being, you know, and the way that even played out was really perfect, because at that point I was still very programmed. I had graduated from high school with a full scholarship to go to Boston University, and I had to live on campus because of my scholarship program. So I was able to still like get away from home, but I really got caught up in like the partying lifestyle. I wasn't really caring about school too much. I was in the School of Business, and at first I wanted to concentrate in accounting, mainly because I've just been always naturally good at math. That's that Tehuti Gemini energy, but just it was natural to me, and I was just like, okay, accountants make money, whatever. So, but then eventually I wanted to transition that into marketing, because, you know, while I still have that business inclination, which has always been like an affinity of mine, I just wanted to lean more into the creative side, if I could find that. And accounting just being like kind of bland in itself. But that being said, I ended up transitioning to New York because I was like, oh, I'll just transfer to another school in New York because I had lost my scholarship. And I honestly did not want to go to school. And I just didn't really know how to navigate that within my worldview at the time, because it was still limited to like, this is what you're supposed to do, and this is how you're successful. But really there was something in me that was just like unhappy and dissatisfied. So I ended up going to New York because my friend Micah, rise in power, because Micah transitioned actually in a motorcycle accident after I had moved to New York. But Micah had told me about his good friend who was working as an account executive at Manolo Blahnik, and they were looking for an intern. And I was like obsessed with Sex and the City. Like, I mean, I had the whole collector's edition, all 6 seasons, and the movies and DVDs, and like, for real, I was really obsessed with Sex and the City. So I wanted to live my Sex and the City dream. I remember driving down with my sister to go to interview, going to New York for the first time. And I never really wanted to move to New York. I always thought I wanted to go to LA. And then when I went to LA, I was like, ugh, I don't like LA. But then I ended up loving New York. So I spent 9 years living in Brooklyn. Well, I also lived in the Lower East Side, in Manhattan for a couple of years too. But mainly I started in Bushwick, and then, you know, ended up in Crown Heights, Bed-Stuy, Brownsville area. But yeah, I spent 9 years in New York, which I loved. I love New York to this day. But the last 3 years of my life, I've been living in Cabo Verde, which is another thing in itself, which I'll get to. But the first time that I actually went back to Fogo, the island that my parents were from, was after I cut my hair. And this is when I had gotten a job at Manolo Blahnik. I started interning there. I wanted to start working there. And I ended up going to the account executive's office, the president's office, and just asking if I could just get a job because, I just felt like I don't want to be an intern. Like, if I could just work, let me just work, because my internship was about to be over. It renewed. They asked me to come back a second time. So I did 2 rounds of my internship, and I just wanted to stay. But, in spaces like that, there's like a very catty and like, there's the way you do things. You got to climb up the ladder. And because I kind of bypassed the other women and just went directly to the president to, ask for the job, even though he had granted me the job, they kind of sabotaged that situation. So it put me in this like really depressed state where I thought I was gonna start working, and then they sabotaged that situation and I couldn't start working anymore there, and I didn't want to go back to school. And thankfully Preston was just like, let's just go somewhere, get out the city for a couple months and figure out what we actually want, because I really got depressed, like, and I don't even really like to use that term, but like in terms of just like, that depression and that like, what am I doing? Like, what am I here for? Just not having any like drive for life anymore. And that's what happens when we attach our fulfillment and our identity to certain things that are outside of us, and we lose it in an instant. Or, whatever our different, attachments may be, crutches, addictions, all kinds of different things. People, sometimes a relationship can end, and due to that attachment, it can cause that degree of depression. But that all happened in the space of, starting this new relationship a year in, really being in that honeymoon phase, really like still a lot of like the traumatic kind of like cycles, or I should say just like behaviors were still, exuding. Like I remember one time pushing Preston down the stairs, and that was crazy as fuck. But there was just like a lot of things that were very unhealed still at that point in my journey. So I want to be clear about that. And I honestly think that was like before I even cut my hair. So there was like something, my spirit was really like, it was like the clock had ticked. Like, like my, the divine has set a timer, and it was like, something was just like, it's time to get up because you're getting crazy. So that started happening, and like we ended up going back to Cabo Verde because Preston was like, why don't we just go to CB? We were gonna like go to Florida or somewhere warm. I know we wanted to go somewhere warm, get away from the city for a while. And he was just like, why don't we just go to Cabo Verde? Your father's there, you have family there. I've always wanted to go there. We go to CB. I had been to Cabo Verde several different times before that, but I had never gone back to Fogo, which is where my parents are from. I'd gone to Sal, to San Vicente, to Praia, which is Santiago, the island where the capital is, Praia. And I had never gone back to Fogo. And Fogo is like a very tiny island. It's the most like rural, like country island. It's a volcanic island. And it's just very unique. And when me and Preston went back, it was my first time going to Fogo, and that was the seed, I would say, or the spark of my awakening, because something about just being there, like, I don't know if it was just in the air, the soil, or whatever it was, but something in me completely awakened. And I just remember seeing the whole world differently. Like, I don't know if people are familiar with tarot, know the card, the Hangman, but I literally felt like that. Like, my world got flipped upside down and I could finally see everything clearly. It was like seeing it upside down was right side up. actually, because I had been upside down the whole time, which is really the reality that most of us are programmed into, where we're living in a world where the values and the whole system that we're indoctrinated into, this construct, is so ass backwards and fucked up that we don't realize it because it's all we know. And then when we finally get to see the truth, because it was a combination of seeing the depravity of my people, like back home, and even looking back here, and just like having that distance from the rat race and not being caught up in it, and you can finally breathe, think, slow down, because like capitalism and the system is like you're constantly going. It's like you can't even think, you can't even process what you're experiencing, what you're going through, because it's so full speed. And I think after 2020, or what I call year zero, everything had to stop and everyone had to slow down to a degree where like it allowed certain things to get caught up and allowed people to process a bit more. But prior to that, it's like go. So for me in 2013, 2014, while in Cabo Verde, because we just bought a one-way ticket, we ended up staying there for almost a year. That year transformed my entire life. I did not go back the same. I saw the devastation of the truth of how fucked up the world is, but I also simultaneously saw the beauty. I saw the beauty of nature in the ocean, on the islands, and just felt that connection to everything. And I was just like, what the fuck have I been doing? Like, how have I been living my life? And my cousin Jorginho also, he, his wife, and her best friend, who is now my best friend, we just had like these exchange moments where they were able to share certain things that were very pivotal. And I remember one day, Kode, who's my cousin's wife, had brought the book Sacred Woman by Queen Afua over. And I never read that entire book to this day, but it was just that first part that I read and just brought me to tears. And that in itself just transformed me, because just the narrative of remembering the power of our nature, the power as a woman of my womb. And for me, it has always been the consciousness of my womb and my responsibility to birth life and to bring forward or continue through my womb has been what has been the catalyst for, or maybe the channel. It's just been something very anchoring for me to commit to making certain sacrifices and disciplining myself, whether it's my food and my health, cleansing my body, any of the things, because I've let go of so many different things. And that's the thing about the spiritual journey that a lot of people don't talk about very often, is the fact that a lot of people don't choose this path because it is very challenging. It's very difficult. You have to shed so much. You have to let go of so much. You have to clear so much. You have to confront so much, right? You really have to go into yourself, into the depths of yourself, into your trauma, into your pain. And the beauty of it has been for me that as the deeper that I've gone into myself, the more clearly I can see and know and be confirmed that I chose all of these circumstances and situations. We chose all of these circumstances and situations that we've experienced, because ultimately when we go into the soul, we are one. And the soul has expressed itself in so many different unique forms. That's what each of us are. We're each unique expressions of our soul, the one, right? And whatever it is that we've come to do, whatever our purpose is, or our purpose, as my sister Tanu would say, because we have many purposes, some of us. But the mission, right? That mission, in order to do it or accomplish that mission, we have to cultivate our spirit. And ultimately, this journey and this experience in life for all of us, whether we're conscious of it or not, regardless if we've awakened to the spiritual nature and our purpose or not, we're on a spiritual journey. And we've all chosen it when we look at the source that we all come from. And that's something that I'll talk about, because I'm going to be sharing different wisdom from an ancestral and African cosmic perspective on a lot of different things, particularly things associated with this life experience, with the concept of time. And I say that because I was just thinking about like the dynamic between our free will and destiny, in terms of like what we have chosen and what we choose consciously in this life. But it's within the scope of eternity. Everything that could ever happen is happening right now in the present. And when we step outside of the space-time continuum and we're in eternity, the past, present, and the future are one. And that's what I'm referring to as eternity. So it's really a beautiful cosmic symphony. And I'm not really going to go deep into that, but it's just like the depths that I went into as I faced my own trauma. The first thing I became very conscious of at one point when I was still living in the Lower East Side. And I remember one night getting into this big thing with my king at the time, and we were like arguing, and I was going to go out with a friend, and he didn't want to go, and it was this whole thing. And I just remember having this moment, and I remember threatening to like jump out the window, and it was so extreme. And a lot of times people have like suicidal moments or like these really intense psychotic breaks and just like breakdowns, and associate it with whatever triggered it, and not having the wisdom to know to go deeper. And thankfully at that time, because when we had went back to New York from CV, Preston had went to go buy me an Ankh ring from Baba Heru, aka the Ankh man. Because Baba Heru is, many people know him because he makes these amazing sa or jewelry, or he calls them joyari. So I'll say joyari, where he makes these emblems, these ancient symbols into rings and pendants and earrings. And he literally does like carrying ankhs made out of gold, silver. And Preston went to go get me this ankh ring. So we had learned about Baba Heru through Queen Afua's book, because I think Baba wrote the introduction to Sacred Woman. And Baba Heru and Queen Afua were married for many years. I know a lot of people are familiar with Queen Afua because Sacred Woman and her work is very on the forefront, but a lot of people don't know about Baba Heru. But they were partners, they were married, and they had actually opened up a healing center, the Heal Thyself Center in Brooklyn. And they had initiated a lot in the 80s, a lot of this information that's now very prominent about ancient Kemet, aka ancient Egypt, and just like really putting that, putting Egypt back in Africa, essentially, and going into that sacred wisdom and like the embodiment of it and putting the spiritual wisdom into practice. Baba Heru established the first shrine in America. And the work that they did was really amazing. And a lot of people don't know about that. So we ended up starting to just sit at Baba's feet and just go and just help Baba paint and help Baba move the studio from one space to another, and just learning so much by just sitting at the feet of this elder. So we had already been cultivating this relationship with Baba. So when I had that moment where I was like, I'm gonna jump out the window, which I don't, whether I would have done it or not, is irrelevant because it just shows the state of mind, right? Thankfully, Preston knew to call Baba. We went to go sit with Baba the next day, and I just started talking about things, and Baba's like, there's something deeper. There's really something deep that you're not dealing with. And I had recognized that the spirit of my grandfather had been really desperately trying to communicate with me. And I only recognized it once I realized that the trauma that I was not dealing with was the memory that was surfacing of my grandfather's murder when I was 4 years old. And when my grandfather was murdered in front of me at 4, I convinced myself that I couldn't remember it. And I was even diagnosed when I was back in college. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder because of that event. And to me, it was just like, oh, I can't have PTSD. Like, I don't even remember it. Obviously, at 4 years old, my little 4-year-old brain could not process that trauma of that loved one. It was just a reckoning that happened in that moment. And I had also met a beautiful sister named Kaprama, who has been my sister and healing ally. She was the first Cape Verdean person that I've met in New York. I remember going into Baba's studio one day shortly after that, and she was actually getting her ankh and having her ceremony as a priestess. And I just looked at this woman, I'm like, why does she look like me? And then she ends up being from Fogo, like her parents are from Fogo. I think she's like 3rd generation, so she didn't speak Creole or anything, but like, yeah, it was like literally that thread, that bloodline from that particular island. And you know, it was just one of those moments like, well, it's such a small world, but it's like also one of those confirming moments that nothing happens for nothing. Long story short, it's 2014. Capra invites us to go stay with her for a month in Toronto to do healing work there. And that was very significant for me. I'm very thankful that on my journey, I really aligned with very significant figures, which is why I'm also feeling really called to come forward and share my journey, but also create more, share my work, and not be so contained. Because it's like a very protective energy that I feel, because as I started coming forward throughout my healing process, which I haven't told that part of the journey yet, I felt like a lot of people extracted from me and really exploited my energy in a lot of ways. And a lot of the things that I was doing to, like, upon coming back, to be of service, creating programs, doing the garden, starting organic food for the people, all the foundational things for Tehuti Ma'at, the Sankofa program for children, doing the sacred womb circles. You know, people would come and just kind of see like I don't know, it's just like that like vampiristic, like vulturistic perspective that people have, where they see the value of it. And instead of contributing to it, supporting it, or lifting it, they take it and see it as like some type of business opportunity and then go and create a business out of it. And it happened so many times, and it was so traumatic for me because I was not making money off of it. And I honestly just felt like it was wrong to, which is why it's taken me so long to even just like come forward with any of the things that I know I'm here to do, because it's just like I haven't wanted to like taint it with that and put a price on things that are really priceless. But I've also come into full balance and Smaitawi, as our ancestors would say, the union of the two regions, and honoring both the higher and lower self, both the spiritual and material reality. And the fact of the matter is, like, the money is a form of energy exchange. Yet some people are very corrupted in that nature, where like they're coming forward with things in a very inauthentic and unhealed way. And when it comes to things that people are going to use for spiritual work, for healing, there's a certain degree of purity that is essential and is necessary for that. And the more that those of us who are here to shine that light and who are truly doing that work, if we stay in the shadows, then those people who are not truly embodying that, you know, righteous spirit in terms of what it is that they're doing and creating, you know, it's like, I think is it, not Khalid Muhammad, the one who created the Nation of Islam. Why am I losing his name right now? Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad said, sometimes you have to put the clean glass next to the other glass so people can see how dirty that dirty glass of water is, but you won't notice how dirty that glass is if you don't have that clean glass of water next to it. So I think that the pure essence of and just really the truth is very important. Sometimes people need the truth in order to recognize the lie. And that's what I'm feeling like this moment is right now, why it's important for me to come forward, start sharing my story, who I am, the essence of what I am here for, and really step into that light. Or I should say just shine that light, because it is the work that I've done, whether it's what happened in 2014 that I was just sharing, of like going into the depths of my trauma, which with Ketra Ma'at, I did a lot of different practices that she introduced me to, but one of the key things is she kept instilling in me, like, don't just do what anyone tells you to do. You have to go with your intuition. You have to listen to yourself. And that was a very important seed that was sown in me, because prior to that, because of my programming being growing up Christian and just constantly looking outside of myself for the answer, right? Which we can easily do, whether it's like in these non-conventional ways where we think like, oh, we're moving away from Christianity. But then it's like, you're going to go get a reading from somebody every day, or you're going to use the cards every day, or you need your crystals, and you're attached to all these other things outside of you. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't use those things, but everything is about, you know, moderation and discipline, and really ultimately cultivating your intuition within, because we live in a maleficent. There's a lot of dense, dark energies that are incarnate in this physical world and in this physical experience right now. And that's something we really need to acknowledge. It's really not all love and light. And the New Age movement is actually an extension of these Western religions, to be honest with you right now. So it's really important for people to have discernment within navigating their healing. And that's why protection is so important, because a lot of people don't have the guidance, which is why it is important to come forward when you have a purpose, when you are a leader, when you are a spiritual warrior, because it's your responsibility to carry a beacon of light. So it is important for us right now to be courageous, to be brave enough to use our voice, to tell our story, to speak the truth, and to be crystal clear about that, because there are so many waves, new waves of people who are coming into their awakening and coming into their journey. And those of us who have started that path and who have learned, we have to share that wisdom so that other people can continue to rise and we can expand as a collective together. So yeah, 2014, doing these practices with Ketra. She also has studied with the Aboriginal people in Australia, a practice called holographic kinetics, which is an Aboriginal dreamtime healing practice. And in that moment of having a holographic kinetics session with her, I was able to actually remember for the first time the murder of my grandfather and other different situations that had created the pattern of emotional instability that I had been recycling in my life up until that point. So I began to consciously work through that energy, work through healing that. And one of the key things I will say about healing, especially in these last 9 years, has been the confrontation of my own self. And that's really an important thing that we have to do if we really want to heal. We really have to feel the pain of the truth of who we are. And that means we have to confront ourselves, confront what people call our shadows. And once we go into the shadows, we can actually shine the light, or the light is birthed within that darkness. But we have to have the courage to go inside. And I know that that sounds very simple, but it really isn't. That's why it's so difficult for us to just go inside. You know, it's so easy to distract ourselves with different things, whether it's our phones, watching things, and sometimes it can even be with positive things. Like, I've come through many cycles within my journey. And even when it comes to different things that you just want to distract yourself from, it could be documentaries and positive things. Like, it doesn't matter. It's about what is it that is inside of you that is calling you, right? And another thing that I want to share is, because another deep healing process that I had beyond my grandfather's murder was being molested as a child. And I remember having hypothyroid. I had a goiter. So this blockage in my throat, aritu, remember arit is your energy center, your chakra. My throat, aritu, was blocked because I had never said anything about it. And that had created and manifested as a physical ailment, hypothyroidism, where my thyroid gland was, and literally as I'm looking across at this tapestry of butterflies, the thyroid gland actually looks like a butterfly. And it produces a thyroid hormone, which regulates so many different systems within the body. So it created this dysfunction in my body. And at the time, I was already coming into my spiritual awakening and this holistic perspective on life. So I knew on a physical level, like, I had really turned to Dr. Savi's words, Dr. Africa, and wanted to focus on alkalizing my body and being very disciplined about that, removing any toxins, making sure that I got water that did not have fluoride, that was not pulling the heavy metals from the pipes, to attack my thyroid with those heavy metals. And I focused on just eating as alkaline as possible, like literally all alkaline. And on top of that, I knew I needed to deal with that healing process. So the big thing for me was I needed to tell my story. I started going to open mics, and that had also retrieved from me the wisdom that had come actually while I was in Cabo Verde in 2013, when my classmate from elementary school had posted our elementary school yearbook, and I saw, and he tagged me in it because he was on the same page. And I saw that my dream in elementary school was to be a singer. And I was so blown away by that, because by that point in my journey, I just convinced myself I can't sing. I just, forgot about like singing as a child, singing in church. And what had blocked that energy, there was an aspect of it that was related to my grandfather's murder, because I didn't scream. Like, once I was able to actually retrieve that memory, I didn't scream. And as a child, I judged myself about that. And I felt like I should have screamed, but I had this knot in my throat. And so there was that aspect, but it was also not saying anything about being molested. So I had to come back home to my family and tell them for the first time, and realizing that the relative that had molested me had molested other people in my family, and really breaking a very major cycle for my family, which, even thinking back into it now, I'm just like, wow, that was so powerful. And it took a lot of courage. And it was not easy. It was like what you don't want to happen when you speak on something like that. People acting like you didn't reveal what you revealed, or people trying to convince me not to say anything about it. And I still just stood in that strength of knowing like what was right. And trusting myself, listening to myself. There was so many exercises of strength through that process. But going to tell my story, even at the open mics, and people coming to me and telling me their story, even people who were perpetrators, who had who were victims in their own right as well, like who had been violated and then violated others, opening up to me and telling me. And I realized, wow, this is way more common than I ever would have thought. And I always felt so alone in that experience, because it's so taboo, because it's one of those things people don't talk about. And I think now, obviously, it's become more common for people to speak on things like that because of like the Me Too movement, things like that, which kind of corrupted it a bit. But at least people have been talking about things like this now, whereas before it just wasn't a common conversation. So yeah, it's just like every time I cleared off a layer of trauma and pain and felt it and transmuted it, I just went deeper into my soul's purpose, and I began to awaken different gifts and abilities. Like the clears opened up, like my ability, my psychic ability, my ability to receive and connect to different dimensions, my ability to transmute and be conscious of things that I probably have been doing my entire life, but I wasn't conscious of it. I wasn't aware of it, and I wasn't even able to really control it. Like, you know, people talk about being empathic. Like, I've absorbed energy my entire life, but I wasn't consciously aware of that. And by the time I got, you know, 6, 7 years in my journey, I was very conscious of needing to go into ritual and needing to really use the elements and fire to consciously pull in other people's pain and alchemize that, to do mourning ceremonies for spirits that had transitioned and died, and listening to spirits and energies that are coming to me because they knew I was like open and learning how to protect myself, like not even just in the physical realm, but in these other dimensions where, you know, I was becoming vulnerable because I really didn't have someone to teach me, you know, how to go into that space, which is my particular journey. I think now a lot of people do have guidance, and thankfully I'm glad that I've been here to even guide a lot of others because of the things that I've awakened myself into, and the memories of my past lives, and so many other things that I've just been able to retrieve, you know, from this journey and this experience. And there's so many different layers of healing that I've gone through. I just wanted to kind of begin to tell my story, I guess, because like I said, it's an eternal story, right? To be a cosmic womb and to be a portal that is primordial. But I think on a grounded level, to be able to express like how I came to even know that, but also the work that it takes to be able to truly get there. And a lot of people come and they show this beautiful, you know, expression without giving the fullness and the truth. And the truth is whole. Ma'at is the whole thing. If it's just a part of the truth, it's not ma'at. It's just a part of the truth, which can almost be a lie, you know, which is very distorted right now in today's society, because we have social media and you see all these positive, beautiful things and you don't see the other side. And I think it's very important to be honest in that way. I've gone through a lot of pain, and I'm thankful for everything that I've gone through, you know, because the gems and the treasures and the wisdom that I've been able to mine from within myself, And each of our stories has that. Every experience that you've gone through in your life, the more traumatic it is, the more gold, the more diamonds, right? Pressure makes diamonds, remember? And that's what we are. We are carbon. But until we actually allow that pressure to really transform and condense that carbon into diamond, it's just going to be absorbing energy. Once it turns into diamond, it actually can reflect that energy. And that's really the state that we want to arrive at, is to birth that light from the darkness, because that pure carbon is black and then that diamond is clear. It's white, right? It's reflective. It reflects energy off of it. And that state has become very liberating, because now I can stand and express my energy and be protected through its own expression of light, and still honor everything that cultivated it. Because when my grandfather's murder, when I was able to remember that, I remember looking at my grandfather and I remember seeing his courage, you know, in front of death, you know, in front of a sawed-off shotgun, and like not being afraid. And that was a rite of passage for me, to know that I have that in my blood and that I have the courage to do what I'm here to do. And in this moment, you know, I stand in declaration of that, using my voice and coming forward. As much pain as I've gone through in terms of the different times that I've shared my story and my journey, and just constantly feeling protective of it and protective of my heart, because of being so open in different points. And I would love to share, you know, more of that in different stages as I continue on. But for today, I think what I've shared thus far is really, you know, the gist of coming into the more conscious aspect of my journey, of my healing process. And it continues. You know, there are cycles that we complete, but then there's more, you know, there's more that we have to heal. And we only do that by exploring our inner world. And that's really one of the most important things for us to do right now, is to go inside and to really see, to really listen to what our womb, even if you don't have a womb, right? Our womb within is telling us, our heart, right? Really synchronizing the mind and the heart, and honoring both the complementary energies, what people perceive as these dualities, to bring them together, to bring them into unison, to create that Smitawi, that union of the two regions, to create wholeness. And we just have to look in the mirror and see ourselves. And thankfully, we have different reflections of ourselves that we align with in our life. So every relationship, every connection is an opportunity for you to see yourself from a different angle. And I hope that as your reflection in this moment, that something that I've shared to you today about my journey, about my story, is supportive in your journey. And I trust that if you're here and you're hearing my voice, that this has been necessary for you. I also want to invite people to support the work that we've been doing. You can follow the work of Tehuti Ma'at, which is the revolutionary instrument that houses all aspects of the work that I lead. So right now I'm here as an expression of Coins and Karis, which you can definitely support. Coins and Karis is all of the spiritual, just the spiritual realm of the work that we're doing, the healing work. And Tehuti Ma'at houses everything. So I mentioned earlier the angel water, the angel 1111 spray, that is available at coinsandkaris.com. I also have been healing many crystals and stones that are now available on the site. So this is one. It's a rose quartz crystal sphere. There's also this rose agate confidence stone. So if that's anything that you're interested in, I think there's a couple of these small tiger's eyes that are still available. But yeah, I really encourage people to support the work, because this is really a huge part of my healing, to be honest with you, is to be fine with coming forward and being supported, receiving for the energy that I put out, and that is coming as a full forward motion, full circle moment of healing my self-value. In this last iteration of my healing that I've been doing in Cabo Verde with my father, has really been about that, about validation, value, and attention to self, and re-mothering and fathering my inner child. And I know that that's a healing that we all are expressing in different ways. So you can go to quinsancaris.com and see the different ways you can support. I also do readings as well, so you can check that out. You can also support on Cash App. Yes, if you want to support me personally, you can support the Cash App. And if you wanted to support the work that we're doing for Tehuti Ma'at, because Tehuti Ma'at is a revolutionary instrument, as I said, is a cooperative community organization. We do different community services and programs, which you can learn more about at tehutimaat.org. And if you want to support that consistently, what you can do is join the Tehuti Ma'at militia. If you consider yourself to be a spiritual warrior, you're on your spiritual awakening, and you want to join a community of people that are very serious. By serious, like Sirius the Star, Sabu Septa, Septet, as our ancestors would say, then you can join the Tehuti Ma'at militia. You can go to tehutimaat.org/join, and you can join at one of the 3 ranks. So we have the Kingdom rank, which you can join at any contribution of any amount, as a monthly contribution. And that gives you access to the Moonly report that comes out every month. So you'll get that, access to any exclusive artifacts, which usually is the full reading that we have for the month, and then any other exclusive artifacts, things that I want to keep sacred, will be behind the paywall, so only for members of the militia. And then at the Empire rank, you'll have access to Tehuti Ma'at Academy and the different programs and things that we have on there. That's $44 a month. And then the 3rd tier is the Galaxy rank. And the Galaxy rank is if you want to actually be a contributor to the cooperative. That means you can contribute to the various platforms. If you provide services, any creative services, you can be part of the High Tops and Heels Creative Communications Agency, which will align you with different gigs and ability to, make money off of the artistic services that you have. Maybe you do web design, maybe you're a videographer, anything like that. And if you want to contribute to your artwork or, artifacts, anything you're creating to the platform, and yeah, if you want to be able to contribute in any way, if you want to facilitate workshops and be able to get opportunities to do that, if you want to lead any programs that we have, you want to start a garden and be part of the Organic Food for the People initiative, anything along those lines, you would have to be a member of the Galaxy, which is an application process, and you have to go through our initiation through the JED, which is our community orientation process, and that's $88 a month. We also accept energy exchanges of anything that you can offer. Doesn't have to be a financial contribution, although that is something that we're really looking to increase so that the instrument can sustain itself. So I want to encourage you to do that. And please like, share, subscribe if you're interested in getting more content like this. I'm going to be talking more about different spiritual wisdom. I'm going to be sharing more of my journey personally, and have a couple of different other series coming through the High Tops and Heels realm. And we're going to be promoting a lot more spiritual elements through the branch of Coins and Karis as well. So stay tuned for that. I want to thank you again for being here, and I want to encourage you to also go to hightopsandheels.com. I'm gonna have to update the site a bit, but I will be sharing more of my journey, some galleries and different things. I'm just gonna come forward more on a personal note to really activate the platform and attract and bring people in, because I know there are a lot of spiritual warriors who are now consciously coming into this work, and I know I have to recruit my warriors. So I'm looking forward to sharing more and being more present, and I hope that you found whatever you needed in this expression, and that you continue to be a part of this journey with us. Travel light and have a great rest of your day wherever you are. Power.